Hi, you're watching Teen Kids News. I'm Lila. Let's begin with our top story.
Hello and welcome to American Stories. I'm Saida Pagan. What we just saw was a clip from Teen Kids News, a one-of-a-kind news show. And with us in this episode is Alan J. Weiss, the executive producer. Alan is a multi-award-winning journalist and president of Alan Weiss Productions. The show is syndicated to 160 stations and is also made available to military families around the world through the American Forces Network. Welcome to our program, Alan.
I'm glad to be here, Saida.
Well, we know, of course, Alan, that this news show, Teen Kids News, was actually the brainchild of the late Al Primo, the father of the Eyewitness News concept. Why did you decide to join him in producing this show?
I had known Al Primo when I was back in the days when I was a producer at Channel 7 Eyewitness News here in New York City. And then I went out on my own, I had my own production company. And Al called me up one day and said, there's news for adults all over the place, but there's no news for young people. And I said, yeah, that's true. I never thought of that. I said, we really should do a news show for young people. So, I figured he was just throwing out ideas. I humored him. I said, sure, yeah, we should do that one day, Al. He said, no, I'm being serious, because right after 9/11, there's been all these stories about teenagers and young kids being worried about the world. They're afraid there's going to be another bombing. Their parents may get shot down in an aircraft. That there's a war going on. They need a way of getting what's going on in the world without it traumatizing them. Some way of getting them engaged, because you need an engaged teenage population so they can become engaged voters when they grow up. But you can't scare them. You can't traumatize them. I said, okay, good point. So let me think about it. Well, literally that same week, my eldest daughter, Lauren, who was about 10 years old, I come home and she says, hey, Dad, I have a question for you. I said, sure, what? It has to do with presidents. I go, I'm great on the subject of presidents. What do you want to know? When they're young, you can answer everything just about. And she says, can you explain to me what the story is about President Clinton and the dress, the blue dress? And I went, excuse me? She says, yeah, I don't understand what all the talk is about. And I said, well, sweetie, where'd you learn about that? Well, we were supposed to watch the news for homework assignment, and so I saw it on the news. I called Primo that night and said, Al, you're right. Teenagers or even younger can't be watching news to learn about what's going on in the world, because there's too much stuff they should not be exposed to. And that's when we decided that we would do a pilot and see if we can generate the interest from stations for a show that was produced by adults. We can't expect to turn a 13-year-old into a full journalist in a short period of time, certainly not, but hosted and presented and reported by teenagers.
So tell us about the content. You mentioned there were certain things that, hey, your kids couldn't really comprehend from traditional news. So what exactly do you focus in on?
So rather than doing a story about an Amber Alert or a kidnapped child that is missing, we do a story on how to be safe, how to avoid internet predators, how you may think that you're safe answering some simple questions. But we showed with the police department in our area, they had a division where they had grown-ups pretending to be teenage girls, and they were having daily conversations with people across the country who were all pedophiles. It was clear by the way they were speaking to what they thought were young ladies. And the police showed us how, in a very few number of questions, they can identify where you are, like in the part of the country. For example, they can say, gee, it's getting dark. Is it dark where you are? No, it's not dark yet. Well, if it's dark where they are and it's not dark where the person they're talking to is, then you know they're in a different time zone. So now you start working your way down bit by bit. What's your favorite team? Half the time, the favorite team is someone in the city that they live in. What do you play at school? What do you like doing at school? What school do you go to? And pretty soon, these people can find these kids. It's extraordinarily dangerous having this device unmonitored in a home, in a bedroom of a young adolescent. So that's an example of we're not doing a story on the actual incidents of a specific kidnapping or series of kidnappings, but we are giving that news you can use to help kids be safe. So that's one thing. Bullying, another thing. You're not alone. You're not the only person in the world that's being bullied. There's not something wrong with you because you're being bullied. Bullying happens. It's a fact of life, and there are some ways to deal with it. Um, Nutrition, exercise. I mean, you name it, Saida. We just did a piece on cardiac arrest, not a heart attack, but cardiac arrest. This cheerleader in college was, she's great physical shape. And right in the middle of her routine during a football game, she collapsed on the field. And if the EMTs hadn't got to her right away, she would have died or had brain damage. So, we do a story on what is, this type of illness. It's something like, 25,000 kids across the country have it. Many of them don't know they have it. So what is it? What can you do to detect it? But more importantly, because we're not talking when doing a show for millions of people, talking about 25,000 is a very small sliver of your audience. What we did was we said, because this does happen, what you need to know is CPR, and here's what you do. So he uses an opportunity to teach teens how to do CPR for this and for other situations. So those are examples of ways that we use what's in the news to give kids information that's, again, not going to traumatize them.
How do you come up with these ideas? You just watch the news, be alert, or do you work with experts in the field of what is important for children?
It's just like a regular news show. Matter of fact, I like to say that Teen Kids News is a regular news show with just smaller people. We get it the same way we got it at Channel 7. We're on the list, PR companies and PR professionals have seen our show. So we get pitches. That story I just told you about was pitched to us by the American Heart Association by a PR person working for them. So we have PR people that call us up and notify us of stories. We have a team, my right-hand person, Mary Lou Yacoub, is the producer of the show, and she, scans the newspapers and listens to the radio and TV and comes up with ideas. And my wife, Tanya, often, walks in and says, "Hey, did you hear about so and so?" And I also.
Is that right? Now, what kind of response have you received from the public on social media? What do people say about what you do, even after 23 seasons?
Well, I was getting these being shown, Mary was actually getting them, but I was being shown these lovely emails from people. And yeah, you'd read them and nothing would happen, meaning they wouldn't go anywhere. So we said, you know what? Let's do one segment in the show as we go to commercial, a bumper, and let's do a viewer mail in each bumper. So we now run a viewer mail excerpt in every show. And basically, we get them from three different types of people. We get them from the teenagers, of course. We get them from parents, and the ones that I think are the funniest ones, we get them from grandparents. But I love the emails that come in saying, I'm not a teenager, but I love watching your show because I learned so much. Because we do try to put an off we try really to put information into the program. It's not just eye candy. It's not just, flashy production and what celebrity is going out with what other celebrity or what bling is hot, et cetera. Yes, of course, we'll interview celebrities, but the basis of our show really is information that is of value. And if it's not of value, meaning it's going to teach you how to do CPR, it's a value because we do vocabulary. We teach vocabulary in a fun way. We teach amazing stories. Like, did you understand how the word sabotage came about? Sabotage came about because the French workers were angry at the owners of the mills that were replacing the workers with machinery. So they took their shoes, which are called sabots, off. They were made out of wood, and they would stick them into the machine, and they would break the machine. And from using the sabot to break the machine comes sabotage. So we do stories like that to educate, entertain, etc.
Well, you've always been a bit of an educator. I remember you always tried to help people along. Of course, full disclosure, Alan and I worked together many years ago, and you were always very helpful. So this is kind of a natural progression, I think, of who you are as an individual. Not that I know you that well, but I know you enough. We worked together for about a year and a half, and you were always wanting to maybe improve the world a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? It's funny you bring that up because side story, but really not. My dad, my stepfather, was the editor of Mad Magazine. And he was the editor from like 1955, 56 up until 1980s or whatever. So really through the heyday of Mad Magazine. And of all the things that were written about Mad Magazine, there was one line that my dad just loved. So one reviewer wrote. And he wrote that because Mad was always doing things. My dad very much was a liberal and very much wanted young people to know that just because somebody's wearing a uniform doesn't mean that they're not capable of lying. Just because someone's an adult doesn't mean that they're not capable of cheating or doing something wrong. And that you shouldn't give blind obedience, especially if you think or you see that something is wrong. That was an ongoing comment that he wanted. It started with Nixon in the White House. It went through the magazine, many, many, many issues, that type of logic. So the line that was written about Mad Magazine was, between the covers of Mad Magazine beats the heart of a rabbi. I've always loved that. And I would like someone to one day say that within the program of Teen Kids News beats the heart a rabbi, a minister, it doesn't really matter what the religion is, just that it's somebody that has an ethical compass, that is trying to follow that ethical compass to the best of their ability and is not trying to sell or in any way cheat or fool or mislead the audience. So, yeah.
Now, I've seen episodes of your show several times, and I think it is absolutely great. It reminds me of Eyewitness News back in the day. So let's take a look at a clip.
This report is brought to you by the National Road Safety Foundation. Throughout the year, the NRSF sponsors contests challenging teens to come up with an idea for a PSA on some aspect of traffic safety. Breely introduces us to one teen who worked really hard to meet that challenge.
We're in Utah, about 45 miles south of Salt Lake City. Sitting in the foothills of the stunning Rocky Mountains is Orem, home to this year's winner of the Safe Rides, Save Lives contest. Why did you decide to enter?
So I saw a need in my community. Someone that I went to prom with last year, their little brother was in a crash and was in the hospital, and there was actually someone who passed away from a crash in my community. So I really just wanted to passionately spread awareness and remind people that we need to share the road. We need to be smart when we're on the road. We need to watch out.
Juliana created a demo video on the importance of sharing the road and submitted it to the NRSF. Then she got the surprise of her life.
I had gotten an email from the National Road Safety Foundation, and I prepared myself for it to just be like hey, thank you for your submission, but we chose some different options that went with what we want. But no, it said, congratulations, you won first place. It made me so very excited. I actually started screaming for my dad, who was downstairs, and he thought someone got hurt, but no, it was just it was just that we won, and I was so very excited. I started emailing them. I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Besides awarding Juliana $3,500, the NRSF sent a professional crew to reshoot Juliana's video so that it would be suitable to air on TV.
I'm Alan. I am the director for this PSA, which the reason why we're here is because Juliana entered a contest and she came up with a brilliant idea.
Juliana's PSA called for actors A lot of actors.
People crossing the street, it's people on electric scooters, people on bikes, people on normal scooters.
The director and Juliana explained to the volunteer actors what their roles were. Also on hand were officers from Orem's police department. Their role was behind the scenes, closing the streets to traffic so the filming could be done safely.
And drive the car, and action! Happy with that?
Yeah, very. That looks great.
What do drivers need to know?
There's two important factors to know, and that's moving over or slowing down. If there's multiple lanes, then you need to move over into that lane. If there's not a lane that you can move into, if it's occupied, then you need to slow down.
So, Saida, as you can see, it's a news show. It's just like the program you said just a moment ago that you and I used to work on. It's a news show produced by adults, but reported by teenagers, because we believe that teens speaking to teens is really the best way to get the viewers engaged.
Now, you have some really intelligent people, intelligent kids. How do you find them? How do you find these wonderful news talent?
Well, two of them happened to be in my home, and they were drafted. And originally, when we first started with the pilot, Al Primo went around to agents, and asked for teens. And we got all these resumes, and we did casting calls where we had 15, 20 kids at a time coming in. And Saida, it's an interesting thing. You've been on camera, so you know what it's like being an on-camera person. Being an actor doesn't necessarily mean you'll make it as a reporter. And we found that the vast majority, virtually everybody that we auditioned for the role of anchor, reporter, etc., acted as if they were an anchor or a reporter. They weren't real. They weren't believable. They were posturing as somebody else. It just didn't work. Only one that I can remember that we got from an agent, Mwanza Brown. Mwanza was young Simba on Broadway for a number of years. And he just had an incredible ability to be relaxed and be real. He wasn't acting. And he was our first male anchor for 10 years. We watched Mwanza grow up from being, I guess he was maybe 13 years old, all the way up to the time he turned out to be 18. No, excuse me, 20. Had to be younger than 13 if it was 10 years. So he was probably 10. I think he probably stayed on the show until he was about 20. That's where he totally, completely aged out. And that was the show. That was the year that we actually won the Emmy. So it was great that the man who had anchored, the young boy who became the man who had anchored the show from its inception, was there when we got an Emmy for the program. And we gave it to him, on set and he was surprised. He didn't know that he was going to get it.
I see all those Emmys behind you, the statuettes behind you. Are they all for Teen Kids News?
Two of them are. Most of them for Eyewitness News and a couple for Arise. Primo came up with a smart idea. He said, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't be going with actors, but we should be going with kids who know things about TV already, i.e., kids whose parents are journalists. So he, went around, and Paula Zahn's daughter, Haley, became one of our anchors, and Jenna Ruggiero, who is daughter of Rosanna Scotto. Cody Gifford, Frank Gifford's son, Cody, was our sportscaster. And then once we got on the air, we started getting deluged with requests from people around the country to be reporters. So we were constantly interviewing new people.
How many hours a day or week do they have to devote to working on your show?
Good question. Well, because of school, because of not just school, but you got to understand that any teen that wants to be on a show like this is a motivated person. And if they're motivated, they're probably doing 15 things anyway. They're probably the president of this club and on this sports team and learning this instrument. So we found very, very quickly that it was very difficult to schedule these teens. Originally, we were going to studio every 2 weeks. We'd knock out 2 shows and we'd spend the entire day in the studio. So it was an 8 or 9 hour day, but we rotated the teens through it. We weren't going to ask any one teen to sit at a desk for 8 or 9 hours. So we coordinated it so that, one anchor did all of his parts, and then the other anchor joined. They did their parts together. Then the first anchor left, and the second anchor finished and did all her parts. So we, pretty much like staging, ballet. We worked it out where the reporters would come in, and the anchors would come in, and each one would have an hour or 2 or 3 on set. Then, for many reasons, we still were having time getting all the teens that we needed available on the same day to knock out all the shows. So we began to group the shows together a little bit more. Most reporters will do their stories in 2 or 3 hours. Again, just like real news.
And what kind of support system do they have? I mean, obviously, these are really smart kids, but they're not journalists. And you spoke to this a little bit earlier about the team of writers and videographers. Tell us more about that.
Well, truly, the beauty of the show is a team approach. I'm fortunate, when you work at a network station or a local station, you work with whoever they give you. You really haven't got much choice. And hopefully, most of the people they give you are good, but not always, and not all of them, as we both know. But when you have your own show, then you have complete control and you get to pick the people that you want to work with on your team. So being able to work, and what else is kind of cool is that, like me, many people have had experience in news. They've been there, they've done that. They like to do something that uses the talents that they learned, but not being the daily grind of a news show, doing the same stories basically over and over and over again under the same deadlines, et cetera. So a lot of people that were very successful in news were interested in coming on board and working on a show that's news, but low-key, fun, working with teenagers, doing uplifting stories, etc. So I worked with a number of people and some of them you would even know from Channel 7 Eyewitness News that came on as writers, as videographers, as editors. But right now the mainstay of the organization is, I told you about Mary Lou, the show producer. David Lauterbach is the editor who puts together a lot of the stories, but he's the one who puts together the show every single week. So that show is, post-produced by David. And Rick Levon, our other senior editor, I would have to say he edits the majority of the roll-in packages. So between them, we're able to handle an awful lot of stuff on a weekly basis.
Yes, I'd like to talk now a little bit about your career. I saw a segment and I learned some things about you that I did not know. And I'd like to roll to a clip right now. And from what I found out, it all began in high school.
I mentioned earlier, Teen Kids News has a special connection with Dalton. Our executive producer, Alan Weiss, is a Dalton graduate. He came along on the shoot to visit his old school.
It's certainly brings back a lot of memories.
Like George, Alan was also the editor of the school newspaper.
Back in the day, right? We didn't have laptop computers.
Or a website.
Yeah. So the Daltonian was printed every week on paper.
Okay.
And so it was like 8 or 9 pages.
Alan told me that the experience was life-changing, literally.
Being the editor of the school newspaper got me really excited about journalism, and I followed it for the rest of my career. I went to college for journalism. I got my first job at ABC News as a journalist, traveled around the world, covered incredible stories.
This is the Horse Guard here at the Palace. They're on their way from here to Whitehall.
This beautiful church was built in the 16th century.
It was June 1940 when the Germans marched into Paris.
Over my left shoulder, you're seeing what remains of World Trade Center number 6. Met incredible people. now I'm the executive producer of Teen Kids News, and I get a chance to work with up-and-coming journalists like you.
Producing news and documentaries and earning 8 Emmy Awards.
The Emmy is handed out tonight for the best in local broadcasting. The special television awards were given out at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. And we here at Eyewitness News are proud to tell you about some of our people who've won. Producer Alan Weiss received an Emmy for the best spot news coverage following the murder of singer John Lennon.
And it all started with being the editor of a school newspaper. For Teen Kids News, I'm Lila.
Looking at that clip, Alan, what are your thoughts?
I just wish that my English teacher were alive. I learned to become a journalist. I learned to become in love with journalism when I came into class one day. It was English class taught by Mrs. Tyrola, who we lovingly call Mrs. T, at Dalton, which is a private school in New York City. And she had written on the board, you have 45 minutes to go and find a story to write about. This is English class. This is not journalism class. We weren't told we were going to be journalists. And we say, excuse us, what are we doing? Just go anywhere you want, but you have 45 minutes. Find something that's worthy of writing a story about. And so everybody went running off in different directions. Someone went to the cafeteria, someone went to the gym, whatever. I ran outside, flagged down a taxi, said to the driver, I need to interview somebody for a school report. Can I talk to you and ride with you? He said, sure, as long as I can have the meter on. I said, sure, put the meter on. So I'm riding in this taxi in Manhattan. This taxi driver ends up being, now you have to understand, this is like in the late 60s. This taxi driver had been in the Polish military. He was in the cavalry during World War II. So he was telling me all about being on a horse, fighting against the Germans when they invaded Poland with their blitzkrieg and tanks, and he's on a horse. It was an amazing interview. And I, got that, ran back, had to write it up that night. We had 45 minutes to get the news. We had a night to write it and handed in the story. And that's it. I was hooked. I like journalism. And so I became the editor of the school newspaper. And I applied to Northwestern, which has a magnificent journalism department, the Medill School of Journalism. And I got lucky to get a job at WABC TV on graduation. Well, I got my master's as well in journalism, and then went to Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
What are you most proud of in your career, Alan?
Okay, a couple of things. In a broad-based answer, I'm most proud of the times I was able to use my skill set to help somebody. And I'll make this really quick. It was the coldest day of the year. I was the producer of the 6 o'clock news. The phones were ringing like crazy. The desk assistants were answering as fast as they could, but they couldn't answer all of them. So I actually grabbed the phone and answered it. And it was a man who was virtually crying on the phone saying, look, I wouldn't bother you. I know you're very busy doing the news. And for myself, I can suffer, but my wife, she's very sick and there's no heat in our apartment and the window is broken. And I've been calling the landlord to fix the window so that the snow isn't blowing in. And to please turn the heat. My wife is under every blanket, every coat. Is there something I can do? And I said, sir, hold on. Let me give you the heat hotline. He said, son, I've called the heat hotline constantly. It's always busy or they put me on hold. I said, please, my wife, she's not going to make it through this. I said, all right, hold on a second. Turned around. I turned to the assignment editor and I said, here's a story for our show tonight. And the assignment editor took it, spoke with the guy, called up the heat hotline, got the commissioner, got the inspectors, got the police, and got a temporary heating unit delivered to this man's apartment in this building. And this man got heat in the middle of this horrible day. That is the kind of thing that I think being a journalist makes me proud.
There are many things I'm sure that you'd like to do with Teen Kids News. What's in mind? What's next? 23 seasons. Unbelievable.
Yes, truly. What's incredible is that there are teenagers who were on our show who are now parents. It's like it's a little bit like Peter Pan, or when he grows up. I think more than ever, in not just in the 23 years we've been on the air, but decades and decades and decades, we need news that people can trust and believe. Now, we try really hard to not be political, um, but we still cover politics in a way to get people engaged. For example, we did a whole story on what is the Electoral College and why do we have it. And it's gotten some of the most hits on YouTube of anything we've ever done. It's just amazing how many people, were interested in that story. Um, Another story we did on politics is this guy who has an idea about trying to bring the left and the right together and have a conversation that polarization is not the answer for this country. Again, without us giving a value judgment on who's right, who's wrong, et cetera, we just want to get young people engaged. We talk about the importance of voting and why voting. People have given their lives so people can walk down the block and drop a ballot, and to not do something is to undercut the memory and the sacrifice of these people. So because of that need, I just want Teen Kids News to just keep going. I mean, we're happy with the model. Can we make it better? Sure. Once you can't make something better, you're in trouble. We can always make things better. Especially if we had another sponsor. We have one main sponsor, the National Road Safety Foundation, a wonderful organization, and we do stories to them constantly on driving safety, which with teens is a key thing. Car deaths is, I think, the number one killer of teenagers in this country. Um, and so they've been a loyal sponsor for many, many years. But we need a little bit more. If we had that, then we can go further with our news gathering. Right now we're pretty, New York centric. But thanks to the internet, we're able to interview people all around the world.
Well, hopefully a lot of people will see this and be inspired to tune in, because it sounds like you're presenting some really important, wonderful things, even now after all these years. And I want to thank you, Alan, for everything that you've done. I know you've done some outstanding journalism. The first year that, or the first day that I entered Eyewitness News, everyone was talking about you because you were in DC. I believe there was a sniper incident. And they said, well, wait till Alan comes back. And I'm like, who's this Alan person? And who would have thought decades later, we are here talking and reminiscing and still being part of this wonderful industry. It can be wonderful. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Saida. It was a pleasure. I loved working with you, and I'm very happy to see the success you've made of your life. So much more success ahead for you, no doubt.
Thanks again. And thank you for joining us for this edition of American Stories. I'm Saida Pagan.